live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome tonight to our fourth webinar in the BRAZ-TESOL Young Learner Teens SIG webinar week. We're very excited to have our next speaker. She's someone who you'll already know and love. It's Lucy Crichton. Hi, Lucy. Thanks for being here with us tonight.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It is lovely to have you with us, and I want to let everyone know why. I've known Lucy for a little while now, and I've been lucky enough to actually visit her school. It's a beautiful school in Florianopolis, and it really is very, very special. Lucy, how long have you been in Florianopolis for now?
I've been actually here for about 25 years.
Wow.
And had the school for 16 years now.
It's just incredible. I was so taken with what it is that you're doing there at the Secret Garden, and when we had this opportunity to do our event in May, and I'm sure you've already heard about the event. It's going to be a look at what we can learn from other areas of education and incorporate into our own teaching practice in ELT. And that's why I thought of having you on as a speaker, because what you're doing is really special and really different. And that's going to be the topic of Lucy's talk tonight. Lucy, would you like to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your experience and what you're going to be talking about tonight?
Great. So I'm Lucy Crichton. Good evening to everyone. Perhaps if you're in Australia, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. So for the next 45 minutes, isn't it, Claire?
Yes.
I'm going to be talking about the importance of outdoor learning. And I've entitled this discussion, A Sense of Wonder. And I will be talking about sense of wonder, outdoor play, and I'll be sharing with you all some ideas of things that I have done concretely in my school.
How fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we could kickstart this just to let everyone know who's watching. At the very end, we'll be opening up for some questions. So feel free to jump in there with your questions, and I'll be asking those to Lucy at the end. Lucy, over to you.
Good, great. Let me just share my slides. Here we go. That okay, Claire?
That looks wonderful. Off we go.
Great. So here we are, a sense of wonder and how to include outdoor learning in your teaching. So I'll start off by giving you 30 seconds to read. This is a blurb from a book called A Gift of Wonder. And it touches perfectly, I think, on the idea of wonder. So, what is wonder exactly? Do you think it's a feeling or a behavior or a mood? I think for me, wonder in the child is seen by the sparkle in their eyes when they're excited about something, when they're engaged with their whole bodies in it.
Yeah, I tied into the words like curiosity, perhaps, that wonder, curiosity, investigation.
Yes, definitely. And also I think when we're talking about education, not just teaching English, we're really talking about the whole child. We're talking about the head, the heart, the hands, and you'll see how these three body parts fit in beautifully to the idea of getting children outside the classroom environment. Did you say something, Claire? No. Okay. So this is another book that I love very much. It's called The Hurried Child. And this is what David Elkind says. The natural world is the young child's first curriculum, and it can only be learned by direct interaction with things. So there is no way that a child can learn the difference between sweet and sour, rough and smooth, hot and cold, without actually tasting them for themselves. learning about the world of things and their various properties is time consuming. Yeah. Childhood needs time. And this is a very intense process that, according to David Elkind, cannot and should not be hurried. Worth looking up, that book, really. It's a gem. So here's a little picture of one of those beautiful outside moments where our students around a campfire, it's actually something we do near Festa Junina. But what happens with this fire is, look at the light on their faces. They become calm. They become almost mesmerized by the flames. And it's a very sort of deep humanistic tribal element. And we do all sorts of different dynamics. But I just wanted to start off with this image from our school to show you. We're obviously very lucky that we have an outside space. And I'll talk about that a bit later. But here we not only have this sense of wonder, but we have this lovely sense of life. And it's so important these days for children to feel these moments, perhaps where they're a bit calmer, they're in a group of people, they're united around something like fire. It was a very special moment. Okay. The more high-tech schools become, the more they need nature. And I'm totally convinced about this. There's a whole movement now about forest schools, playgrounds that encourage risky play. And it just has to come more in over here to Brazil. We really need this. I hope it becomes like a fashionable thing. I'm really sure that to counterbalance the sort of daily stresses and the difficulties that all teachers have in their classrooms, this is going to be an essential ingredient from now on in. So this challenge and this beauty that we have with technology is overriding direct human interaction, this face-to-face exchange and this connection that children need to have with the real worlds around them. I mean, the blue sky, the crunchy grass. Okay, we have to help these children, move over to a sort of more healthy development. We don't want kids that look like this. And I see it often. I see it in my school too. It's kind of like listless, pale faces, tired children, stressed children, and always this emphasis on the head and not on the heart and the body of the child, right? Yeah, they get very emotionally stressed and disconnected to school. And there's all sorts of problems that we're having in all our schools because there's an imbalance. And in my mind, the imbalance can be counteracted, if you like, by just getting kids out of the classroom, just out, not necessarily into nature, but outside into the world. This is the kind of faces, this is the kind of energy that we need to incentivate in the children that we teach. And we need to have a dialogue with families, to help basic things improve, like good diet, enough sleep, etc. Love and care on a regular basis. So today I was talking to a friend of mine who's been in Hong Kong at the International Forum, the World Forum for Early Childhood Care. And she sent me this video about playing in mud. And this now is an International Mud Day. It's every June the 29th. And it started off by one Australian teacher that was at this forum in 2009. and an Indian teacher that started up this project about getting kids not only outside, but getting them dirty, roughing them up a little bit, you know, getting them into contact. I know this might seem really extreme, but I just think it's fantastic. You know, I have so many kids who don't like taking off their shoes and socks, who don't like touching, you know, massinha de modelar or clay, who have never climbed a tree, who can't skip rope. Yeah, there's like a disconnection. And can you imagine? Look at these happy faces. I think we should have a mud day in Brazil if it doesn't already exist. So outside learning, let's see some things that it offers. Well, it offers autonomy and freedom as, you know, students wander around the playground area or the park. Doesn't necessarily have to be nature, you know. There are plenty of good outdoor activities that you can do in a safe car park, in an alleyway of your school. It's just getting the kids out of that desk and chair classroom. That would be the first step. So they can burn off this excess energy that a lot of them have, especially the boys. Perhaps you can also foster moments of calmness where even if you only have a little concrete square at the back of your school, the students lie down, they look up at the sky, they see the clouds. That is already going to do them a lot of good. So they're going to practice all sorts of different social behaviors. If, like, you have trees in your school, like I have in mine, they're going to learn to calculate risk. They're going to learn to master how to climb a tree, which will involve physical fitness, resilience, self-regulation, and just being outside, seeing things move, feeling the air, listening to the wind in the trees is fantastic for imagination. And as Claire said, curiosity. So children feel this sense of the world, not just by seeing it, but they feel it with their whole bodies. And I love this little picture of this girl. She's absolutely loving lying on the grass. You know, she's doing it with her whole body. And there is a sense of wonder there too. So we show life to children and we teach them through words, through gestures. But, you know, most of all, we do teach them through our beliefs. So it's important for teachers to think about the way they see this idea of getting their students out of the classroom. Yeah, perhaps you worry that they're going to be dispersed, they're going to be unruly, or perhaps you worry that they might hurt themselves, or they might rip their clothes or get dirty. So we need to think about our own beliefs if this is going to work. Look at the picture. If the parents were anxious about the child going into the sea, that would immediately pass over to the child, okay? So we really have to examine our beliefs very carefully. Environments. If we can create a lovely environment, not just in our classroom, but in our school, wouldn't it be lovely if students remembered that experience as really positive? And I'm going to briefly talk about classroom environments very quickly, just because I think, you know, with a tiny little detail, we can do so much more for our students, okay? Let me move on. So my question here for you was kind of, what kind of school do you teach in? And do you have any access to any outdoor places? Do we have anybody, Claire, on the chat?
Let's have a look. Clarice is here.
Yes. Okay. What
So
does she?
we've got a couple of people watching. So would anybody like to jump in there and answer one of these questions?
I think I know that Clarice teaches in a very interesting school in Australia.
Oh, wow, that's why she said good morning.
Yeah.
Well, I can certainly jump in with an answer there, Lucy, because like a lot of teachers, I have been in situations where the school has not collaborated with allowing the English program to occupy other spaces around the school.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly been in my career, I don't think I've fought enough to be able to make space for the English program outside of the classroom. And then as I got older and got more confidence, I think that definitely happened at the last school I was at in Newport.
Yeah, we do have to fight with that sometimes, but I'm going to give some ideas about bringing the outside into the classroom as well.
Well, the last school that I worked in had fruit trees. They had it was all beautiful and sandy, so it was very soft surface for kids to be able to jump and fall and not hurt themselves. And that we'd go outside and do storytelling underneath a tree. And what you're describing, this environment that you're describing, this learning environment that you're describing certainly resonates with my experience as well. I can
that's good.
Relate to that.
That's good. All right, I'm going to move on in a little bit. Well, here is the secret garden for those of you who wanted to see it. And I must say I am very lucky. I created this space myself. I'm very stubborn. It was made brick by brick. It was a lot of hard work. It wasn't overnight. It took a lot of time, a lot of sweat. But when I look at it, it's definitely a learning environment that goes together with my principles. And so wherever you teach, try and find something that connects to some of your principles as a human being as well, and if there's something you really don't like, fight, make new choices. So this isn't in my school, but this is one of those lovely classrooms with plants inside, with a lot of light. It's the kind of classroom, where the outside is in a little bit and we can move around the classroom in different spaces. This is not our reality here in Brazil. This is more like our reality. A space with natural light, but not proper windows, a space that has nothing on the walls or in the classroom that says anything about those students. It's a very anonymous environment, right? Now, I want to tell you, it doesn't matter what your classroom looks like or how many students you have, you can still make a difference, but you're going to have to make an effort to do that. I've seen these kind of classrooms all over Brazil, lots of kids, but that doesn't mean to say that you, on your way to school one morning, can find a flower shop, buy a big fat rose and put one petal on each desk so that the students will pick it up, smell it, feel their texture. It'll be a very interesting gesture, not just of nature coming into the classroom, but it'll tell the student, my teacher wants to do something different. My teacher's invested in me. My teacher's sharing something. My teacher's showing me love. Okay, there's lots of things kids think about with the things that we bring into class. So if you make an effort, there is always something to be done. And sometimes less is more, okay? So if you look at this image in this very busy classroom, no wonder the kids look a little bit listless and yawning. There's so much information there. It's like, learn. There's no open space. It's all about, you've you know, you got to learn, you got to do this, here are the words, this is that. Look at the other side. Less is more. The focus would be on the teacher, on the blackboard, on the tree, with the sound of the wind in the trees, you know. Between those two, let's think about getting more of a balance. So I'm going to show you just very briefly the two principal pedagogies that influence everything I do. I mean, I'm open to different things, but these are the two that are closest to my heart. So the Reggio Emilia approach from the north of Italy, they have such a beautiful way of working in and outside the school with their children. They actually call the outside the third teacher. So it's basically very experience-based, play-based learning. They have beautiful and specific materials that they offer their students, and a lot of the learning is child-led. So if you focus on what this little girl right at the front is drawing, it looks like she's drawing like a person or a bug. So even though they're looking at a beautiful book that's showing them mushrooms and funguses, her divergent thinking is perhaps taking her to a bug she once saw on a mushroom. The point is, the book's there not for everybody to draw mushrooms, but to instigate their curiosity about something in nature. Okay, so that's Reggio Emilia. I mean, if you're interested, there's loads of beautiful things to read about it. There's some wonderful images as well online. And the other one, as most of you might know already, is Waldorf education. It's an incredibly social educational system where the school community is always involved in the child's learning process. Here, they also have a very deep respect for the natural world. The students that I get from a Waldorf school, from the Waldorf school here in Florianopolis, you never see them breaking twigs off trees or, you know, picking up flowers, or they have this respect. They will never hurt or spoil your garden. And also there's this other beautiful unfolding of individual capacities. Childhood is completely respected. Each child has their own timing. So I love Waldorf education for that as well. So very much can be taken from mainstream education and we can put it in to our language learning schools, okay? So play-based learning where students are asking questions. Here in this bottom photograph, you can see that they're involved in observation. They're not just out and about in nature. They're sitting down, they're having to observe something very specific. They're experimenting, and that will lead to reflection. You know, it's just perfect. There's so much that outside world, the outside world offers to education. Now, if we don't have this, we bring the stuff into our classroom. Look at these beautiful things that I found where students can take a magnifying glass for specific observations. I mean, there'll be a wealth of language that they can learn from doing that. Textures for sensory play. Yeah, Claire's always talking about sensory bottles and beautiful things to do with early childhood learning. You see here, we've got a river going on the floor of the classroom, yeah? It's possible. And here also we've got some loose parts there, so lots of sensory play. With the river, we could use it for a story, for a song. With the pieces of nature, we could do a project about sound. We'll be working with fine motor skills. We can bring in CLIL, the arts. And these things, you know, we can find them somewhere. I mean, all cities have a park. So there's a way of finding nature that you can bring into your classroom. Here are my favorite stories and songs that also connect to the outside. The first one is The Stick Man. It's the same author as the Gruffalo, same illustrator. When I told my students this story, they immediately wanted to go out into the garden, get some sticks and reenact the story, making the stick men out of the sticks in the garden. I mean, that was just a natural progression. So you can bring the sticks into your classroom if you don't have a garden. The Gruffalo as well is a beautiful story set in a forest with forest animals. So we can bring this story into the classroom, perhaps with some pieces of green cloth. There's always a way of making our classes different and special. Also, I've included The Secret Garden, which is about a very special garden. It's for slightly older children. And the two songs I like a lot that we sing in our circle time outside is the Mulberry Bush song and also Lavender's Blue. But these are just a few. There are hundreds of stories and songs that connect to gardens and outside play. You can also have a little nature table in the corner of your classroom where you can bring things, the children can bring things that they find, which can include paintings, drawings, a bird's egg, a nest they found, a shell from the beach. And you can also label these things, but you can have like a seasonal table in the corner of your classroom that changes, obviously, spring, summer, autumn, winter, to have that nature in the corner of your classroom. I found this as well, this recipe for preserving children. Look what it says. 1 large grassy field, 6 children, 3 small dogs, flowers, narrow strip of brook with pebbles, so like a little river, stream, hot sun, deep blue sky. And here's the method. Mix the children with the dogs and empty them into the field, stirring continuously. Sprinkle the field with flowers, pour the brook gently over the petals, cover with a deep blue sky and bake in hot sun. When children are well browned, they may be removed. It's perfect. It's the perfect recipe for healthy childhood, right? Wouldn't you agree? So here we have, in my school, we've got a kitchen garden where the students plant. And whenever they're planting, whatever they're planting, they're going to use this eventually, or to taste, or to make a tea out of, or to use in our cooking classes. But again, you don't necessarily have to have a kitchen garden outside. In the top left-hand picture, you can see kids inside the classroom. They've been planting beans and they can follow the growth of the beans over a period of weeks. They can measure it. So you've got maths coming in, science. So it can also be done inside the classroom. On the opposite side, you've got some of our students. They're tasting the lettuce, and down below they're making a spinach omelette. I love it that the boys are learning to cook. So we can also do that in or outside the classroom. So I was going to ask you now to tell me some of the things you've done with your students. Claire, are you still there? Some of the things.
Can you hear me there?
Yeah, some of the things that I was thinking that some of the teachers might have done with their students outside already, if they've had that possibility.
Well, I absolutely love all of those playground games that we all know from our childhood, and I think they're a wonderful way to teach language as well, and getting kids out there and playing hide and seek, what's the time, Mr. Wolf,
Yeah.
all of these kinds of playground games.
Yes.
Another
Skipping.
popular one, skipping, hopscotch,
Hopscotch.
floor is lava. The kids love these.
Yes, it's true.
And I found that when I've taught children these in class, I've arrived at school earlier on or stayed a bit later to observe the kids, and I've seen groups of kids playing on their own in English.
Exactly.
And that's incredible. That's an incredible feeling to watch them. When we take the language outside of the classroom, we show them that English is not something that only occurs in those four walls, you know.
Exactly. And it's lovely when they get to learn those new games. They only know how to play them in English, so they'll naturally use English to do that.
Yeah. And then I guess some of the other things that I've done are nature walks, where I've taken photographs of different things in our playground and printed that out onto sheets, and then given them these images, and they had to go and search. And you know what, Lucy, it was incredible to see how they suddenly started looking at all of the details that they saw every day but didn't pay attention to, like the moss on the trunk of the tree.
Yeah, wonderful.
Different types of leaves and flowers. So that's all fun to do too. And the last, I think, worth mentioning is the outdoor nature discovery table, where things that we've collected go onto a table and they're left out there with scissors and magnifying glasses. And at any moment throughout the day, the kids are able to go up there. Not even in English class; it's in the playground now.
Lovely.
It's left there, and they can go up and they can explore the things on that table.
Yeah, it's just perfect. That's exactly it. And it's like bringing their awareness to what surrounds them, right? Here I put some ideas of some things that, you know, we see online as well about how to use English to talk about the outside world. I liked this one because it doesn't just talk about the weather. It talks about what you wear on certain days, in certain seasons. And it reminded me of what I have at the Secret Garden, which is we have this little signpost on the gate. And I decided to have, there's another one that was actually on the gate when I was painting these. So we have spring, autumn, winter, and summer was on the gate. So you have something in your school that helps students realize, right, that it's, you know, constantly changing. They are constantly changing. Their teeth are falling out. Their trousers are getting shorter. You know, it's connecting them to what's around them. So we can do that on our classroom. This brings me to the fairies as well. So the fairies started off in this old tree trunk here. It was a dead tree, and there was a hole in it. So we started this thing with the fairies, and the fairies only speak in English. So they'll leave little notes for the students, what the students are doing. For example, if the students are cooking, the fairies will be cooking. You can see one here. It says, "We are so cold. Can you make us a warm bed, please?" So the fairies always leave the students messages. The students make little bundles of wood when it's cold. They've got their Festa Junina flags up. So there's this other connection, not just with what's out in the garden, but with this beautiful fantasy world where they could feel perhaps protected by nature. And we only speak to the fairies in English. So it's also a beautiful way, communication, little tiny written messages, and all sorts of things happen here. And it's a lovely thing to do. The first graders just adore it. Also, this was another thing. I used this book about being an explorer of the world because I had some very boisterous boys in my class. And so we started off talking about what would you need to be an explorer of the world? So they came up with this list of things which we put on the blackboard, like a binoculars, torch, mini notebook, gloves, magnifying glass, tweezers, and then somebody said snacks, a water flask, and then one very smart boy said, oh, can I bring my penknife from home? Can you imagine? Anyway, so I gave them a box of tools for them to make some sort of explorer equipment. And also we went to the local shop and we bought some things that they wanted. And we made like a sort of explorer kit. This little bag is actually taken from a friend of mine who did a project at school in Sao Paulo, where the little ones had an explorer kit each. And this little boy here, it was like from very energetic and running around and not focusing on anything to completely focus and get engaged in the classes that we had. And he made this double magnifying glass headset so that he could explore whatever he found. So depending on the context and the way that we bring this sort of idea into the classroom, I would say it's particularly good for children that don't seem to be interested in anything, they're not engaged. I believe there's always a way to get them excited about something. One of my favorite things that I had in my little village in the countryside where I was brought up, in Buckinghamshire, just outside London, was making a garden on a plate. I've taken these images off the internet, but I've done this with my students many years ago, making a world or a little garden on a plate. It was a fascinating activity. They were totally engaged in it. And when the gardens were ready, they had to talk about them in English. So it's another lovely idea, a paper plate, bit of sand, some bits and pieces for them to create their own world on. It was really nice. And now I'm going to just move on to tell you about a project that we did connected to the kitchen garden, because it's not just a garden, it's a learning tool that we have as well. And so I'm going to show you the questions we asked. It was kind of like project-based learning because we asked our students a lot of questions. They had to think critically about certain things. But most of all, what I really wanted was them to have this connection with the school and what we were offering them. So it started a little bit like this with the first question. Why is there a kitchen garden in our school? I'm just going to say these answers in English, although the students did respond in Portuguese. But Juliano said that we have the kitchen garden to plant our things so that we can eat them. Lizzie said so that we can, dig the earth and learn how to look after plants. And Elena said, we plant so that we don't have to eat animals. Very sweet and very funny. Always as well, when we're working, we have the possibility for the students to draw their experience as well. What kind of things do we plant in our garden? Well, we plant herbs, Danielle said, for our tea. Lizzie said we plant lettuces and tomatoes because we can put them in our sandwiches. And João said we could plant corn to grow it and then also to eat it. So we were discussing about, what we could plant. So our project was to observe the relationship that our students had with the garden, but particularly with the sense of smell. Okay, just to get their senses really awake. So we started off about talking about the sense of smell and what smell tells us. So we had good smells and bad smells, smells that could tell us about danger, smells that could tell us about things that are healthy or unhealthy, and lovely smells that we like fresh bread, flowers, the smell of a new book. So we excited those ideas within them first. Here they are in the garden planting. Sometimes when we're in the garden, we like to sing a song to make sure that they're not always speaking in Portuguese, so that they can work calmly with music through English. And then we focused on, well, why do we have a nose? So Annabella, she said, well, we have a nose so that we know when something's good or not good to eat. Arthur said, well, we can't smell with our mouths, can we? And then the question was asked, how do we smell the smells when we smell earth? Yeah, how do we do that? Well, sometimes we smell and smell and smell, and then it takes us a while to find out what it is exactly, especially when we're talking about herbs. So we got 12 different smells from our garden, and we numbered them, and we wanted the students to look at them, smell them, and also try to identify where they were exactly in the kitchen garden. We talked about it. We introduced the field research. You see, you can see them smelling the different herbs that we were offering. And then they went into the garden to try and find those smells. So it was lovely. They were bending down, trying to find if that leaf was the same as that one, if that smell was exactly the same smell. So you can already see, you're not just using their nose, using their whole bodies, using their minds, their eyes, their senses. And then we had a very simple little handout, which was whether or not they liked or didn't like the herbs. It was a very simple one because they were first and second graders. Perhaps if they were slightly older, we could have had ideas about, well, what could we use those herbs for? Do you have any questions about those herbs? I just want to point out the two dragons on this this form. This was a lightly autistic student that we had. So dragons were always in his work, but he particularly loved this exercise that we did. So this is a quote from Loris Malaguzzi from the Reggio Emilia. He says, the learning process is a creative process. It is the ability to construct new connections between thought and objects that brings about innovation and change, taking known elements and creating new connections. I'm going to show you that's exactly what happened with this project. As we were identifying the herbs, saying if we liked them or didn't like them, they particularly liked, we had mint and lemongrass, and then they said, oh, could we make some tea from it? Because yeah, the smell goes straight to the stomach, right? So the teacher made them tea, and then there was a whole discussion about being careful because the tea was hot and how long it would take to cool down so that it was safe to drink, etc. But the joy on the students' faces, the total connection. So then, where does the smell go once it's in our nose? That was another question that popped up. Alice said it goes to our lungs. Annabella said it goes to our brain first, and then we know what the smell is. And they wanted to paint this. So they painted a person with the brain smelling the flower. So the flower going up through the nose, straight to the brain. And then above they added a sort of squirty perfume bottle. And then, I love it, they put the Secret Garden initials, which was a tattoo on the person's neck. I mean, there's no end to the things they come up with. And then finally, this whole project was documented. And this is, you can see it's in Portuguese because it was part of the Reggio Emilia study that I was doing about documentation. I think it's nice to leave it in Portuguese as well, because we're in Brazil, and there are a lot of teachers who would, perhaps appreciate reading in their first language as well. So I just wanted to say that it's important to take photographs, document what your students say, what their reactions are, because this sort of project is really nice to share with your school community. And when you can do this, you can see that parents will become more curious about what you're doing in your English class. They will collaborate with you. There's absolutely nothing to lose. The only thing for busy teachers is that, yes, it takes time and it takes planning. You have to download the photos from your phone. There's lots of different little things that you have to do. But people, if you agree with this and you love teaching your students, if you love English, then think about taking your students for a little walk outside the classroom. So to wrap up, I will say, provide the fertile ground for children to experiment with life, cultivate autonomy, and practice the feeling of wonder. So thank you for being here. I know that we live these very, very busy lives, and the webinars that we have aren't always possible to see live because we are in class. That's our mission. But I do hope that some of these ideas will spark a bit of inspiration and give you some ideas of how to bring this essential element of learning to childhood development. Thanks.
Oh, Lucy, thank you. How wonderful to listen. I had my mic and my camera off. Do you want to stop sharing those slides again now?
Sure.
So we can see you.
Okay, hang on a sec. There we go. Am I back? Activate.
And now you need to click the button that says stop sharing the slides. So maybe go over to that green one there.
Let me see. Okay.
There we go. We're back.
There we go. Great.
See, I had my mic and my video off during that but I can't tell you how many times I laughed with joy, or I had a big smile on my face to listen to the stories from your classroom and from your kids. And it's really, really touching to see this kind of learning taking place right here in Brazil. We think it's something that's so distant from us and so far away, but we can probably find more examples. I'd love to hear from more teachers about what it is that they're doing in their classrooms.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I'd love eventually to hear from teachers who have the difficulties, because there is always a way, right?
It is. And you've shown us so many of those. We saw lots of lovely examples. I'm going to mention a couple of takeaways that I got from this webinar just to summarize, I think, some of the key points for people. What struck me and the thread that ran all the way through this talk was this real focus, not on the language itself, but putting the emotional needs of each child first. And I think if teachers think this isn't relevant for an English language classroom, I urge them to think again, because as we can see, it is through the way you've created these emotional connections with the language, you have managed to engage even those kids who have started off being really disengaged and uninterested, in those kids who often have classroom management problems with.
Yeah.
It's through, if we don't look at this, we're constantly struggling. We're
constantly. And they're doing that because they're saying something, they're saying, look, I need more space. I need to run around. I need to connect to what's around me. I see it all the time, and I'm convinced. Please, Brazilian teachers, let's try and do this movement Yeah, to get
Yeah.
them outside.
And it's such a part of Brazilian culture too, I think.
Isn't it? Going to the beach, going to the park.
Outdoors. There's so many beautiful
Yeah.
outdoor spaces here in this country. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was the materials that you've shown us. And often teachers have to pay for materials out of their own pocket. But what you've offered us this evening is a look at some completely free options. It's going back to basics and finding things in nature. And these don't cost anything. Less plastic.
Less plastic, less money.
Yes.
More beauty.
And if we think about how much all of these plastic toys cost and the pedagogical value of them, you can really weigh up and think, is that really worth the investment? Whereas in Brazil, there are some beautiful handicrafts. Stop buying plastic and get baskets from your local market.
Yeah, the Mercado Público, one of the best ones I've ever been to is in Belo Horizonte. Hundreds of stuff. Wonderful.
Wow. Well, that's another great tip that I took away here. And when you were talking about documentation at the end,
yes,
you didn't mention it, but I know this takes place in your school. You make these kinds of fact sheets, these information to educate the families of the children who are attending your school. And I think that's really worth mentioning for the following reason. And it ties in with what you said at the very beginning. We're terrified of children getting dirty, getting sick, hurting themselves, taking risks, climbing on things. And a lot of that worry has come from home. And it might be, and we have seen this big push from families to get children reading and writing as early as possible and passing tests. There is a pressure from families. And I think you found a really nice way of educating the families as to the pedagogical benefits so that they can see the value.
And they want to do the best for their children. They love their children. When they have the right information put down in the right way, 9 times out of 10, they'll get the point of it and they'll feel supported and they'll see how this sort of education is helping their child grow and thrive. And
jump on board, and then you have that support that you mentioned, and you have that permission for the children to come home with a bit of dirt on their face.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but, dirty clothes is because you've properly played. You have.
I agree. And then the fairies, that was one of the moments where my heart started beating faster. And you sort of said first graders love it. But Lucy, when I have a look at the care and dedication that has gone into preparing all of those little things from the fairies, I think it's not just the children who love it.
Oh, it's totally me as well. Totally me. I absolutely adore it.
And my takeaway from that was this: when we start teaching this way, we fall in love with this approach and the results that we get. And my top quote for everyone that I want everyone to keep in their minds and their hearts leaving this webinar tonight is, make an effort to make a difference. Lucy Crichton, 2019.
Oh, thank you. Great, Claire.
I really love that. And that is just, for me, what teaching English is always should be about. Teaching children should always be about, not just teaching English, because we're not teaching the language, we're teaching little people. Yeah. Thank you again.
Good.
Now, officially, on behalf of the Young Learner and Teen SIG, I would like to really express our extreme gratitude to you for being here tonight and sharing with us this beautiful approach, philosophy, and teaching practice that's happening there in your school. And we hope that we can collaborate many times after this. And for all of you watching as well, the recording, thank you very much for joining us. And we hope that this webinar has touched you all and will have positive repercussions in your classrooms all over the country.
Great.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks a lot.
Well, that concludes our webinar. I really hope you enjoyed it. A big thank you to everyone watching. And I'd like to take this opportunity to give you some rather fantastic news. On May 4th, we are taking a step outside of ELT with our first event for 2019. Yes, the Young Learner Teen SIG and the BRAZ-TESOL Sao Paulo Chapter have teamed up to bring you some workshops on topics such as design thinking, the maker movement, neuroscience, growth mindset, because we feel that there is so much we can learn from stepping outside of our industry and discovering ideas, techniques, and knowledge from other areas of education. We also have two very special plenary speakers, Sandra Rodrigues and Danielle Andrade, who bring some inspiring messages to help us redefine the way we see our roles as educators. So if this is something you're interested in and you're in the Sao Paulo area, do come along. We've got an extra special discount for everyone who's attended this webinar. On the next slide, you're going to get a QR code and a link that will take you to get this discount. There are only 20 tickets available, so get in as quick as you can. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you there on May the 4th.